So to start off, I will go through the materials that are required for knitting. So there are actually two types of knitting needles. This is the closed cap kind of knitting needles, where you only can knit on one side of the needle. So this is suitable for knitting in rows, and if you don't need any complex patterns like creating cables or working in rounds, then that is suitable for you because the loops will not slip off the other end of the needle when you're working in the row. So another type of knitting needles is this double pointed needles. So usually they come in a set of 4 needles because it's intended for circular knitting. So you can create a hex like this where you can knit in rounds. This is suitable for beanies and also for 2-layered scarves if you want it to have the knit pattern at the outside of the scarf. So these are also suitable for knitting cables, which require interweaving of the knitting stitches. So you can actually use the knitting needles to transfer the loops into another stitch and actually turn it around to create the braided look for cables. So for stitch markers for knitting needles, it is actually an enclosed circle, so you can just put it through the knitting needle and flank it with 2 loops at each side of the stitch markers. So that's it for the materials required. So to start off, I will go through how to do a cast on. You just create a V, insert your needle underneath the thumb, go up and pull the other end of the V and go back through the thumb. So at this way, for the first cast on that you do, you will get 2 loops, and for the second one and the subsequent cast ons, you will only get 1 loop. So this way you can just count the number of stitches that you require for cast on, and you will definitely need to leave a very long tail if you need to cast on many stitches, because the tail is also used when you are doing the cast on. So this is definitely something that is different from crocheting. So just take note that the number of stitches that you cast on will determine the width of the knitting project that you're going to do. For knitting, there is only 2 basic stitches. The first one is the knit stitch, where you just insert the needle on the right behind of the left needle at the loop and pull the yarn through, and then you can drop that stitch. So basically you're transferring the stitches from the left to the right. So you just continue working until all the loops are transferred from the left needle to the right needle. So the main point to take note for knitting for this knit stitch is to actually put the right needle at the back of the left needle to when you form the cross on the loop itself. Insert your needle, yarn over and pull through. So at the end of the knitting, you can actually see that all the stitches are transferred to the right needle and there will be no loops left on the left needle. So for the purl stitch, you just insert your needle from the front to create the X, but this time round the right needle is on top of the left needle. So just yarn over and pull through and drop the stitch that you already did, and then move on to the next stitch. transfer to the right, yarn over and pull through, and drop the stitch on the left. So you just continue doing this to create the purl row. So usually we will alternate the knit and the purl rows to create a nice stitch pattern where all the knots are on one side. These are the only two basic stitches that you need to know for knitting in general. So after I completed the purl row, you can see that all the stitches are now transferred from the left needle to the right needle as well, and you will get a nice row of V's like this. So when there's two rows that I did, the first row being the knit row and the second row being the purl row, you'll get two rows of V's. So you can see that the length is slowly increasing, and for the next row I will alternate again and I will do my knitting for this row. So I will do the knit stitch for the entire row, and you can see that the length of the knitting piece will grow longer and longer. So you can see at the end of the third row, the length of the knitting piece has already grown, and you can now see 3 V's at the bottom of the needle. So it will continue growing in that direction, and you can see that the width will not change as you continue knitting. So you can continue increasing the length, but you cannot increase the width. If you do alternately the knit and the purl rows, you'll get a pattern that looks something like this, where there are V's on the front side and the knots are on the other side of the piece. So the last thing we need to do is to learn how to cast off. So to cast off, it means to remove the piece, the knitting piece that you have completed from the needles. So to start off, you will insert the needle into the first loop, do a knit stitch, insert your needle into the second loop and do another knit stitch. So you will have 2 loops on the right needle. Pull the first stitch over the second stitch like this, such that you will only have 1 loop left on the right needle. Then insert your needle into the next stitch again, pull the first loop again over the second loop to only have 1 loop left on the right needle. So you just repeat this throughout the whole row, and you will end up with only 1 loop on the right needle at the last stitch. So you do a knit stitch, pull over the first over the second stitch, knit stitch, pull over the first loop over the second loop, do a knit stitch again, pull over the first loop over the second loop. So when you reach the end of the row, you will have 1 loop left on the right needle. So what I can do now is actually to snip off the yarn end. So grab your scissors and snip off the yarn end, and just put this yarn end through the loop on the knitting needle, and just pull tight and remove that knitting needle, and you will get a nice cast off like this. what happens if you make mistakes in knitting? For example, if you happen to just drop all the stitches on your needle, you can actually see that there are visible loops that you can put through your working needle. So just gently tug on these loops and put your knitting needle through, and you can see that it is as good as new, and you can continue knitting from there. So another common mistake that happens is actually drop stitches. So for example, if I drop this stitch and it happens to tug all the way down such that it went down several rows, something that I can do to fix this is actually just quickly grab my crochet hook and turn the piece to the knit side where there are all the nice V's. I just insert my crochet hook through the last loop that I can see, pull the horizontal line into the stitch, and I continue doing that up until the row that I'm currently working on. So I just grab the yarn, pull through the same loop, and I just put it back onto the knitting needle, and you can see that it is as good as new. All the purl stitches are back. And at the front you can see that all the V's are also nicely lined up. So these are two quick fixes that I often use when I am doing knitting, because for knitting it is more prone to drop stitches as you are working all the loops on the needles. That's all I have for today. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more crochet videos. Bye!